Hi everyone, welcome to Maitri Plays Games. I am Maitri. This originally was going to be a standalone video, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought it kind of fit as part of this mindful gaming series that I've been doing. Before we get into the meat of it then, just to kind of give you a little bit of context about why I think that. The central theme of the mindful gaming series is emotional intentionality. So, allowing yourself to have your feelings, but knowing that your behaviors are not beholden to them unless you want them to be. So, yes, that is a personal journey, but a part of being emotionally intentional is being good stewards for the communities around you and honoring the uniqueness in human beings, that come from, how they were raised, what values they have, what cultural background, cultural practices they follow, that kind of thing. So to that end then, one of the things that can really benefit all communities and the pursuit of mindfulness is true inclusion and celebration of diversity. I want to say out loud a piece that I think a lot of people misunderstand when you talk about diversity. It's not you, it's you and it's like when the Black Lives Matter slogan first came out, there was a lot of misunderstanding, and I would argue that there is still some misunderstanding that the unspoken part is only Black Lives Matter, which is not even a little bit true. The unspoken part is Black Lives Matter too. So, diversity, it's people who are not you and you. The application of mindfulness to diversity and inclusion is about appreciating and opening yourself up rather than rejecting difference. Difference should prompt interest and curiosity rather than a reflexive defensiveness and sort of shutting down because something unfamiliar must automatically be bad. Be intentional then about that focus. It's really only very recently that people around the world have started to notice and have language to describe a lot of the systemic and institutional problems that have been kind of subjugating certain groups through, having innate processes and beliefs and whatever else. And these typically tend to really benefit capitalism as well as archaic colonialist power structures. Thing is, those of us who lived through it, it's been real and we thought it was pretty obvious, and we're just like, all right, this is just the way it is, I guess. But what we have also been learning as we've been sort of learning the language to talk about these things, a lot of folks that are in these communities that are privileged and not othered don't even know that the problems exist. So there is some amount of education that needs to happen, some amount of awareness building that needs to happen as well. And of course, the remedial actions that need to be taken also. So that's what we've all been navigating and trying to address. I don't want to spend any more time on why diversity and inclusion is important. It's 2022. Either you get it or you don't. I'm not going to sit here and convince you. The conversation today is about how to enable diversity and inclusivity, not whether we should. Your brain is going to go into this sort of weird protective mode, but you have to teach it that just because something is foreign doesn't mean that it's dangerous and threatening. You just don't know about it the same way you know about other stuff. That's an opportunity, that's not a threat. But that can only happen through intentionality and through reminding yourself that you are smarter and stronger and more capable than your first impulse and reaction. So, okay, you've gotten past that first reaction, which, rooted in fear and self-protection and preservation and whatever else. Now you want to actively pursue diversity and inclusion in your games. So when we start to ask ourselves how we can enable diversity and inclusion, the questions we have to ask can give us some uncomfortable answers. This is where self-acceptance and awareness comes in, that this is an opportunity, not a threat. Just think about it, like, isn't it so wonderful when you feel validated and empowered and comfortable and respected? That's all enabling diversity and inclusion is. It's creating that feeling for people who have historically not had that, especially from the lens of race and gender. I'm using the term gender throughout this as sort of a catch-all term in the interest of brevity to encompass gender, gender identity, and gender expression. Mindfulness around fostering this kind of equity and access to vulnerable and marginalized folks will make you grow and transform into a better version of yourself. You're not going to be changing into something unrecognizable. That's really what true inclusion means. Not losing your individuality, but rather enhancing it by recognizing and embracing others. So, with that, let's dive in. Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Maitreyi and I'm very passionate about tabletops, and I'm learning to be a better GM, better player, and a better person. And I want to share with you some of the cool stuff that I have learned. What I want to share today is how I've learned to bring diversity and prioritize inclusivity at your table. If you are someone who thinks, it's stupid to be intentional about this stuff, I don't pay any attention to race and sex and gender, sexuality, everyone is equal, that is commendable. Congratulations. I bet you have a ton of different people at your table with different perspectives and different lives. And I bet you're just really welcoming and inclusive, and you probably have nothing to gain from this or any of my videos, and you should probably leave. For the rest of us who have to be a little bit more intentional about not letting our privilege harm other people without us meaning to, this video is for us. In addition, you should also watch Play Your Roles video about the growth of inclusivity on tabletops, which I will link in the description for you. The very first thing I want to do is sort of demystify the idea of diversity. It's this big nebulous concept that's kind of weighed down with colonialism and racism and sexism and transphobia and ableism. So talking about it can kind of seem insurmountable, but it isn't. And to paraphrase the theologian and human rights activist Desmond Tutu, the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. As someone for whom inclusivity is both an academic interest as well as a lived interest, diversity and inclusivity, I am very much aware of how inclusion can be done well and how it isn't. And that's lesson number one, really, is specifically understand what marginalized folks are saying about their own inclusion in things. If detractors are trying to minimize the efforts by throwing around words like pandering and tokenization to make it seem both stupid that efforts are being made at all, and then to imply that it's being done wrong when it is being made, those people should not be thought of as voices of reasons. They are detractors. So as tempting as it is for me to say, you should know better, you should do better, I am willing to accept that people want to and you don't really know where to start. I'm taking that as a good faith lack of knowledge, something you want to rectify, not just the complacency that privilege can give us. The purpose of this video then is not to point fingers or to target anyone, although there are a lot of targets to be had and a lot of places that finger pointing can be done. Steve. There are a lot of problems around racial and gender biases, and we have tackled all of them, but for the purposes of tabletop gaming, let's do it one bite at a time. I want to give you some actionable, specific ways that you can work towards better diversity at your table. Okay, so before we get into it, first, why? Quick why. Most simply, representation has been sorely lacking. When I was a kid and a young adult, which was, 20, 25 years ago now, I mostly only ever read about cis, able-bodied white folks as protagonists in books and in TV, unless I specifically sought out something different, which was not easy to come by. That's probably basically true for every English speaking person my age or older, which is the typical demographic in tabletops. Most people in the space, and like the majority of people that I'm addressing are my age and older. It's hopefully a little bit different for younger people now. Like over the last 5 or 6 years, there has been an increase in representation around Black and brown and queer folks as content creators, protagonists, performers, all of that good stuff. I mean, you can count them on one hand, but it does start. And cis men are still overwhelmingly in charge, and it's unfortunately then them that needs to make space for the rest of us because they're holding all the cards. Here's the main thing, including us, now that it's been brought to your attention that we haven't been so far, it's not meant to be a punitive thing. It's just remedial. And it is fixing a problem that we've identified. Why does it feel like a punishment to include us? That's the underlying problem. So, diversity for diversity's sake is one thing, but the other part is that fundamentally our lived experiences are going to be different than yours, and they are different from yours, so we bring a certain freshness and experience with us. And in any capacity, it's so fucking cool to have people who see things differently than you do in your space. You get so much out of it. I've lost track of the amount of times a male friend has said to me, I hadn't really considered it that way. And that thing that they're commenting on is fairly mundane to me. And I'm not saying it to try and brag. I just mean that, if you consider yourself open-minded, you'll get a lot out of having different people around, because they'll bring something that maybe you hadn't thought of before and would be interesting. So that's why it's good to have sort of intention around inclusivity. Let me share with you, as I said, a few specific actionable things that you can do. Number 1, specifically engage with marginalized content and creators. Watching my videos is honestly a good start. Not because I'm a voice of the people or anything, but because of what I represent. I represent your willingness and your capacity to engage with content and creators that are different than you. Yes, in the tabletop space, but also outside of tabletops, because honestly, that's where a lot of us get inspired for our games anyway. Find Black and brown YouTube creators and podcasters, actual plays with BIMPOC casts, read books by BIMPOC authors. I guarantee whatever medium, whatever type of content you enjoy, there are several underappreciated and unrepresented Black and brown creators and performers. Whether you're into sci-fi or, rom-coms on Netflix, video essays on YouTube, anything that you're interested in, I'm gonna link a few things in the description that you can maybe check out if you're interested in branching out a little bit. Seeing media that has a diverse cast of performers and creators will give you great examples of how to enable the next point I want to make. Number 2, make marginalized folk important NPCs. It's super easy to just go with those same familiar but tired tropes, for your NPCs. You have your friendly, flirty barmaid who's a woman, the slimy male politician, the stern male weapon master, the gossipy female shopkeeper. But if you put just a little bit of variety in there, your world becomes so much richer, and it doesn't need to be with more than minimal effort. Women, trans folk, who are black and brown especially, should be your quest givers. They should be the magistrate of your town, captain of the guard, head of the guild, the key diplomat. Make people of consequence in your world be explicitly, in a real world parallel, non-white marginalized folks. So black, brown, people of color, disabled where possible. The purpose of doing this is to normalize seeing competent and influential women, people of color, disabled folks, trans folks. If you just even look at the examples that I gave before, look at the power structures of the tropes. The barmaid and shopkeep are women, and the weapons master and the politician are men. But if you make a deceptive politician a brown woman who hasn't given up her femininity, like Avasarala in The Expanse, that is incredibly interesting. And that character is incredibly interesting. I've got a video about the combat wheelchair that you can check out. I'll link it in the description. I talk about what including that kind of thing means for your world. And I think it's broadly applicable here as well. If you are playing a more modern game or a sci-fi game, give these NPCs non-anglicized names as well. A super easy way to do this is to look up actors and actresses from the 80s or 90s and mix and match their first and last names. So 90s famous actresses from South Korea or 80s famous actors from Nigeria. And you can kind of mix and match first and last names. And you will get diverse names for your NPCs that are non-anglicized. Number 3. Avoid colonial descriptions. Words like exotic, oriental, especially if you have a person of color at your table who is not North American, these words set off little warning signals for us because they are the words used by well-meaning racists. I'm not saying that you are racist. I'm saying that racists ruin some part of the language. Like how nobody wants to name their kid Adolf anymore. So instead of exotic, use words like lush, rich, decadent, opulent. Instead of saying the decor is oriental inspired, you could say, the decor is typical of this place with lotus and peacock reliefs carved into the teak. Your descriptions will be better for these changes. And anyway, words like exotic are fundamentally kind of meaningless. They just mean foreign. That's a word you can use when you're describing something unfamiliar. You can say foreign. Don't put color commentary on it, that's all. You see rich wood inlays of lotus and peacock reliefs, foreign and unfamiliar to you, but you get the sense of wealth all around you. This goes double for when you are describing people. First thing, it is not racist to be explicit about race. It is racist to put judgment or morality or inherent to anything in your descriptor. So, also, if you just say, she was Asian, that tells us literally nothing because it makes it seem like you think all Asian women look the same. And like, India is a part of Asia, so is a large part of Russia. China is also a part of Asia. All very different when you think of a Russian woman, an Indian woman, and a Chinese woman. So take a moment and differentiate them just like you would your white NPCs. Are her features delicate? Are her lips full? Does she have an impish smile? Are her eyes sharp or sleepy? Does she have visible tattoos? Is she heavily muscled? Whatever it is, you don't have to do anything except maybe a little bit more than your regular white NPCs. You can say, he was a tall and slender Korean man with long shaggy hair and piercings on both of his ears. Also, when you're describing people, avoid food-related descriptors like coffee, honey, caramel skin. I don't really want to educate folks about the fetishization of brown skin in Asian women. Believe me when I say it'll make any woman of color at your table be like, no. It'd be the same as a brown person comparing white skin to like yogurt or boiled rice. Like it's a little weird. It's not a huge deal. It's not capital R racism, but as long as we're being intentional, let's be intentional about this. On the other hand, if you have an NPC that is very specifically supposed to be sexually appealing, not any other kind of appealing, sexually appealing specifically, you can use this language to describe their physicality as long as you understand the nuance of it and you understand the meaning of the language. I will point to an esteemed performer of our time, Ricky Martin's English debut, Livin' La Vida Loca, a dramatic reading. Upside, inside out, she's living La Vida Loca. She'll push and pull you down, living La Vida Loca. Her lips are devil red, and her skin's the color of mocha. She will wear you out, living La Vida Loca. Come on. Anyway. So I'm gonna link the actual song in the description because it's a banger. If people want to learn more about this phenomenon, there are a ton of academic papers about this that you can read, and it won't take more than a quick web search to find them. If I come across any easily enough, I'll put them in the description. You should check the description box for this video generally because there's going to be a lot of really cool links and videos in there. So these are the words and the word choices you can make or not make. Like, I'm not your mom. I'm not going to police you. I don't actually have a dog in the race of how good or shitty of a person you are. If that's important to you, these are things to consider. Number 4, seek out people of color. It is awesome that you have women and queer folk and trans folk join your games, but if you're in North America and Europe, they are probably white. And yeah, that's great, but like it's not really diversity. Black and brown people continue to be massively othered, even in these communities, and often especially in those communities. I think people sort of assume that because there's a shared othering that happens, that we must all have the same challenges and be one community. We don't and we aren't. Even now, if you look at most astral play streams, they claim diversity, but it's an all-white cast. And in many communities that are not explicitly for folks of color, I'm talking about the Asians Represent Discord or Daisies and Dragons, we are significant minorities. I'm not going to tell you how you should run a community so that more POC join. That's another video. But you should be inviting or connecting with people of color however much is comfortable for them. You should be inviting them for games. You should be joining their games. You should be checking out creators of color and joining their discords, or at the very least, subscribing to their content and engaging with it regularly. Number 5, diversify your pre-gens. If you're running a game with pre-gens and they are humanoid, make them different ethnicities than Eurocentric, make them different gender identities than cissexual, and different sexualities than straight. Or you can remove those elements entirely and allow your players to pick whatever they want to play. You're going to have people with all different lived experiences at your table, especially at conventions where pre-gens are most likely to be used most prevalently. And it can be really nice as a player to have aspects of familiarity, as well as when you go in and you're already a minority, it's really nice to have some element of your existence feel normalized. It's a really meaningful thing to do, and it's not difficult to do. Number 6, restrict implicit biases. This is unfortunately almost purely anecdotal. I have not been able to find any academic research on this with regards to implicit biases in tabletops and in gaming, but there are studies about implicit biases against women and people of color more broadly, which I will link below. I feel like it's fair to extrapolate for this as well, based on those studies and based on my own experience, as well as having spoken to other women and people of color in the space and having them sort of corroborate a similar experience. Fundamentally, the problem is that you can't fix what you don't see. And what you might not be seeing is that you are favoring certain players over others. This is most glaring in things like meta currencies in games, things that the GM gives out for various reasons that players can use to affect the game. So inspiration in D&D, bennies in Savage World, XP in Cypher, things that players can use to either affect the world or outcomes of rolls, that kind of thing. There is a very significant bias against women, and specifically women of color here. We just don't get as many of these given to us with a male GM, even though we are just as engaged and, we call out when we're using our hindrances in Savage Worlds. We make them laugh with joking in and out of character, like, whatever, things that will will get you a Benny or get you an XP if you're a dude. Like, you get that, you make your GM laugh, here's a Benny. And whatever. So it happens a lot. It happens all the time. Even with GMs that I would generally say are exceptional GMs. I actually realized that I was doing it too in my own game, but my bias was that I was giving out inspiration to this really sort of dramatic or wacky RP, and what that meant was that I was leaving out the more serious tactical player, and he's just as engaged. It was completely wrong for me to do that. And I didn't want to do that. And so I'm actively trying to fix it. This is what I mean when I go, you go back to this sort of video. None of this stuff is meant to be punitive. It is strictly remedial. It is just, we've identified a problem. How do we fix it? So anyway, I have started handing out inspiration to story beats. So everyone gets one on a fairly predictable, regular basis. I'm actually also going to be starting to hand out one to each player at the start of the session so they can give it to another player to use that session. So I don't know how it's gonna go, but I'm interested to try and see. Anyway, I can basically hear everyone watching this video being like, oh, I don't do that. But, like, that's the implicit part. Like, you might not realize you're doing it. And as someone on the receiving end of it and on the giving end of it, I can tell you these errors happen. It's better, obviously, if you can address this in a more direct way by addressing the bias. But unless and until you are able to be completely equitable on your own steam, why not figure out a way to mechanize this so that you're reducing biased behavior that you might not even know is happening? It's not like you lose anything by mechanizing this and doing it more consistently. And you may end up starting to solve a problem you didn't even know existed. Anyway, so that is all I have. Obviously, this is not like a checklist of like, do these things and receive your woke sticker in the mail in 7 or 10 days. It's just ways that you can start being inclusive. Again, it's not a bad thing that people want to play with you, and it's not unreasonable that when we do play, we want a little bit of familiarity. Everyone else gets to have that. Like, it shouldn't be that big of a deal to do that for other people. And you might not have realized this because you've never not had it. It's just that now, we are able to speak up and we're able to say, oh, hey, I think you forgot us. And these are some ways to remedy that. So I hope this was a useful video to you. Definitely, this is not like an all-encompassing list. These are just ways that I think that you can get started on this path if you haven't already, or ramp up activities that you're already doing. And certainly after you do this kind of basic level stuff, it will behoove you to sort of educate yourself about like the nuances of bigotry and racism and institutional racism and that kind of thing. But why don't we start by you watching some YouTube videos? So cool. Well, thank you so much for sticking around. This is a heavy topic. I value and appreciate that you would take the time to learn about this with me. So thanks again. Come see me again soon. Bye.